Good evening. Welcome to this climate conversation, Climate Urgency, Awareness, and Literacy, hosted by the DNC Council on Environment and Climate Crisis. I'm Michelle Dietrich, founder and chair of the council. Thank you so much for joining us on this, our 22nd climate conversation since we launched just over a year ago. This evening, we are gathered from many places. I'm speaking to you from my family farm in Southeast Michigan, on the land of the Anishinaabe. Wherever you are watching from, thank you so much for being with us, because wherever we are, our earth is being devastated right now as we speak by the climate crisis and environmental injustice. But there's also so much wonderful news today. The passage of the American Rescue Plan, which is absolutely tremendous news, the swearing in of our wonderful new EPA head, Michael Regan. So much hope. And so wherever we are in DC and everywhere, there are people like you who are working and thinking about how to end the devastation and to heal. If you are just joining us, welcome to this DNC climate conversation. We are excited to be joined today by actor, activist, and author Jane Fonda, DNC Chair Jaime Harrison, American Federation of Teachers President Randi Weingarten, Sierra Club President Ramón Cruz, and my co-host, Allison Stevens, the Climate Council's Director of Black Engagement. At the Council's Facebook or YouTube live streams, we are sharing calls to action and links shared by our speakers. And big thanks to Council Policy Committee members Chris Round and Preston Van Alstine, who will be interacting with you there. To receive calls to action and to connect with the Council by email, you can text CLIMATE to 833-66-11550. We'll be repeating that later. I am now absolutely delighted that Jane Fonda, our keynote speaker, is with us today. Jane is a two-time Academy Award-winning actor who last week won the Cecil B. DeMille Award at the Golden Globes. Her career has spanned over 50 years with more than 45 wonderful films and awards that include 7 Golden Globes, and with crucial work on political causes, including women's rights, Native Americans, and the environment. She will next be seen in the 7th final season of the wonderful Grace and Frankie. Currently, Jane is leading the climate charge with passion and vision with Fire Drill Fridays, a national movement to protest government inaction on climate change. Her latest book, What Can I Do? My Path from Climate Despair to Action, describes her personal journey with the movement and provides solutions for communities to combat the climate crisis. And it is a book that resonated very strongly with me. Go buy it. Jane, thank you so much for being with us here today as we discuss the deep need for urgency and awareness of the climate crisis.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate being invited to speak to the DNC Climate Council. Let me get personal. I was really depressed in 2019 because while I'd done all the right things as an individual to reduce my carbon footprint, I knew it wasn't enough. You know, individual action is the on-ramp. It's not the end point. But what to do? I'm famous, I have a platform, but I didn't know how to use it strategically. And then I read Naomi Klein's book about the Green New Deal. Her clarity in discussing the science and letting us know that while time is running out fast, scientists say we can make it if we act fast. It motivated me to call Greenpeace and ask their help in mounting an action, not so much aimed at the government, but aimed at the apparently 25 million Americans who are alarmed by the climate crisis but haven't done anything. Because, according to the Yale Climate and Communications Program, nobody asked them. I wanted to ask them. The 2018 International Panel on Climate Change said that climate change is a collective crisis demanding collective action on a scale that humanity has never actually accomplished. We need large numbers of people working together for solutions that work for climate, for workers, and for our communities. There's such a gap between what the science says is needed and what governments are doing that in 2019, over 1,500 scientists from more than 20 countries called for civil disobedience. explaining that, quote, "We believe that the continued governmental inaction over the climate and ecological crisis now justifies peaceful, nonviolent protest and direct action, even if this goes beyond the bounds of the current law." So I moved to DC to launch Fire Drill Fridays, to reach and inspire people who were alarmed but don't know how to get involved. Over the 4 months I was in DC, people came from all over the country, willing to engage in civil disobedience and risk arrest. The vast majority had never done it before. We've continued Fire Drill Fridays virtually since last year, and in 2020, around 9 million viewers attended all across the whole platforms. Leading up to the election, they volunteered by the thousands to text and call the climate voters who had sat out the previous election, and also before the Georgia runoffs. You know, it's quite clear to me, and the data backs me up, that people really care now about climate, and that when we can protest again in person, they're going to show up in unprecedented numbers to demand action from our elected officials. What scientists are saying is very clear, virtually unanimous, and it's going to be very, very difficult. But hundreds of millions of lives hang in the balance with every half degree of warming we either enable or avoid. Okay, so what did the science say we have to do? One, we have to prevent any new fossil fuel projects. No more investments in fossil fuel extraction or infrastructure. Two, we must cut our fossil fuel emissions in half by 2030. It's 1 decade. If we are to maintain warming levels at 1.5 degrees Celsius. And three, we have to begin a gradual managed phase out that will bring us to zero emissions by 2050. And we need to do this in a way that safeguards fossil fuel dependent workers and communities. Okay, so here are the crucial and pretty dramatic facts. Globally, we have more already developed reserves of fossil fuels than we can burn and stay within the goals set by science. In other words, continuing just the existing fossil fuel operations, never mind new ones, blows our remaining carbon budget. There's no wiggle room to be adding new fossil fuel production projects if we want to stay at 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's the goal. Now, I hope I don't lose you by showing this graph from Oil Change International, but it clearly demonstrates what I'm saying. You see the orange column on the right, that's 2 degrees Celsius. That was the original goal set at the Paris Climate Treaty, but the scientists are saying things are warming too fast. That would be catastrophic, the 2 degrees. We have to keep warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's the column in the middle. And then on the left, you see the already developed coal, gas, and oil reserves. That's what's already been developed. Look what happens if we use that, if we burn that. We totally go past our carbon budget. It's quite a challenge, isn't it? But we have to do this, and renewable energy is ready to step up. The price of solar and wind power and storage batteries has dropped a dramatic 50 to 100 years ahead of what the International Energy Agency was forecasting only 10 years ago. Mark Jacobson, the director of Stanford's Atmosphere Energy Program, has calculated how almost every country on Earth could go to 80% renewable energy by 2030. Our challenge is getting rid of fossil fuels. And the other challenge is political. Now, climate activists in the US are pinching themselves over what the newly inaugurated Biden administration is doing to address the climate crisis. You know, in just 50 days, what he's done is just amazing. I mean, who would have thought that our first climate president would be Joe Biden? But we should keep in mind that his brave new stances are the results of years of climate activism, protests, strikes, marches, lobbying, civil disobedience, and unrelenting series of extreme weather events, fires and floods. And all of these things have put the climate front and center, along with the pandemic and an economy in crisis, has helped move President Biden from an establishment, fear of deficit spending and big government politician to possibly becoming the, quote, first truly post-Reagan president, as Michelle Goldberg wrote in the New York Times on January 28th. The president's statements and appointments are real reasons for hope. He seems to be committed to addressing the climate crisis, the economic crisis and jobs crisis, and the racial injustice crisis collectively, right? Not sequentially. And this is really critical. Moreover, his White House National Climate Advisor, Gina McCarthy, said recently, quote, "Climate is a racial justice issue, and solving it advances justice and creates union jobs," unquote. Now, this statement is immensely reassuring because it's imperative that justice and job creation be at the center of Biden's climate rollout. I mean, how many fossil fuel jobs are already being cut by industry decline? But we can lessen the pain if climate and labor groups work together. Now, fortunately, the green energy sector is far more job intensive than the fossil fuel industry. But see, the salaries are not on a par with the largely unionized fossil fuel industry. And this means that in giving financial support to the clean energy economy, the federal government needs to demand that the new jobs be family supporting union or union equivalent jobs, and that they are available as soon as the fossil fuel workers begin to transition. No space in between. This is what's being done in Germany with coal workers. Working families and communities deserve to know that fighting climate change won't result in unemployment or a reduced standard of living. And solar panels and wind turbines aren't the only jobs available in the new green economy. There are tens of millions of workers needed to build electric fast rail systems and charging stations for electric vehicles, not to mention the workers needed to rebuild our dangerously decaying storm management and fresh water delivery systems, and to retrofit millions of homes and office buildings to save energy and make them resilient to extreme weather events. These things have been needed for well over a decade. Had prior Democratic administrations been willing to address them, millions of jobs would have already opened up for the unemployed or underemployed citizens who felt betrayed and neglected and decided that Trump at least offered something different. You know, I walked working class precincts in Michigan and Pennsylvania in 2018, and I heard over and over again how the Democratic Party was MIA. Addressing the climate crisis in a way that creates good union jobs, a healthier environment, and prosperity for all is the way for the Democratic Party to really build back better. So this transition needs to start happening now for climate, for justice, and for 2022. You know, if this administration hasn't put people to work in good green jobs by then, don't like to think about it. If Biden does things right, I mean, think about it. The Rust Belt and rural wasteland of the United States can become a thriving union towns with safe, dignified jobs that are simultaneously helping America become strong while combating the climate crisis. Surely President Biden understands these things. He's a good pro-labor guy. And yet he announced the closing of the Keystone XL pipeline without offering a plan for a just transition. Labor and climate activists and Democratic Party activists mustn't let him do this again. You know, that's why Randi's AFT and I work with groups like the Labor Network for Sustainability to bring our movements together to create a just, sustainable economy and environment. President Biden has been clearer when it comes to environmental justice. He's already pledged to direct 40% of climate and clean energy investments to disadvantaged communities that have borne the brunt of fossil fuel pollution for decades, the ones that are deemed sacrifice zones. Now, other things we have to do real quickly. We need to make certain that the Biden administration reinstates the Obama-era export oil ban oil export, and expand it to include gas. You see, absent an oil export ban, declining consumption in the US won't automatically lead to declining production, as the oil and gas can still be extracted and then exported. And since we're all on the same planet, cancels out a whole portion of the progress made by reducing fossil fuels through electric vehicles and renewable energy and so forth. Now, another thing, the upcoming budget reconciliation process offers an important opportunity for Congress members to finally address the massive subsidies the public is currently paying to prop up the oil and gas industry. I urge you to please seize this opportunity and redeploy those funds to build a clean energy economy. Climate scientists warn that we should not rely on claims that in the future bioenergy with carbon capture and storage will be a solution, but it's going to be pushed real hard. Maybe one possible tool in our toolkit, but the scientists say that instead emergency efforts must be made to bolster and heal the natural systems of carbon drawdown. You know, on land, this means ending deforestation and vast reforestation. It means fundamentally altering our systems of food production from industrial mechanical tilling of monocrops to restorative agriculture, such that soils are once again able to sequester carbon, resist flooding and erosion, and provide healthier food. And this would mean a return of family farming and food democracy. And it's very heartening that the president has committed funding to help farmers make this transition. And Gina McCarthy's there to make sure the Department of Agriculture makes it happen. Ending fossil fuel production, emissions, and the production of single-use plastics will allow our oceans to heal, which will improve their ability to sequester carbon. Now, to accomplish all that needs doing is not a multi-billion-dollar effort. It's a multi-trillion-dollar undertaking, which means we have to get over the idea that deficit spending is bad right now. Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman says, quote, "The new paradigm suggests both that the public debt isn't a major problem and that government borrowing for the right reasons is actually the responsible thing to do." Look, neoliberalism and austerity has to be thrown out. They've had their chance and they failed utterly. HR 1, now S1, and the Thrive resolution, which is coming, are essential pieces of legislation to hold on. As writer-activist Naomi Klein says, failure to do these difficult tasks in time is a choice, not an inevitability of human nature. We are not doomed unless we choose to be. And I choose to believe that together with President Biden and his administration, we can get it done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane, for laying out the challenges and the possibilities that lead to a green, sustainable future for all, including in a Rust Belt state like mine. And I am really excited about the incredible intersectional leadership that President Biden is demonstrating. You mentioned Fire Drill Fridays, running short on time, but they've become a highlight of my Fridays. Can you just mention how we can connect and maybe tell us a little bit about tomorrow?
Well, tomorrow, Ben Jealous, who is the president and CEO of People for the American Way, was the youngest president of the NAACP. We're going to be talking about S1, a way to get our voting rights solid and back and stop, the gerrymandering and all kinds of things like that. It's going to be fun and exciting, and I'm so glad you watch us. Thank you.
Oh, I look forward to it every Friday. And I know millions or others are like me. That's going to be a great event. And I'm glad we're going to get to talk together a little more later in the live stream when all the speakers will come together to respond to some of listeners' questions. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
When I learned that Jaime Harrison was to be the next chair of the Democratic National Committee, I was exuberant, and I was so right. Jaime is engaging in outreach and building connections inside and outside the DNC with diverse communities, the kind of organizing that's crucial to good governance and to winning, and we need both. Jaime currently serves as chair of the DNC. As the son of a single teenage mom, he was raised by his grandparents in Orangeburg, South Carolina, and he knows what it's like for a family to have to choose between paying the electric bill and putting food on the table. He knows what it's like to go to sleep in a home with no heat because the power was shut off. Thanks to a good public school education, his family and his community, Jaime was able to earn a scholarship to Yale University and attend Georgetown Law. After college, Jaime went back and taught in his old high school, and then worked to help empower disadvantaged kids to attend college. In 2013, Jaime was elected the first African-American chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party, where he served until appointed as associate chair of the DNC in 2017. In 2020, Jaime ran for the US Senate from South Carolina and ran an awesome campaign building a national grassroots movement. Jaime, thank you so much for being here. Would you share with us some of the highlights of President Biden's really bold, ambitious climate agenda?
Thank you so much, Michelle, for that introduction and for your leadership of the DNC's Environmental and Climate Crisis Council. I also want to thank Ramón, Cruz, and Randi Weingarten for everything that they've done for our country, our party, and our planet. And of course, I want to recognize the legendary Jane Fonda. She is one half of one of the best shows on TV, Grace and Frankie. And I want to just thank her for her passion, for her heart, for her activism, for using her voice to fight for a better world. Thank you so much, Ms. Fonda. And finally, I want to thank all of you, not just for joining us today, but for joining us in this fight. You know, there's a lot of talk about climate change, and that climate change focuses on the future, on our children and on our grandchildren, on the incoming generations. And folks, that's important. But it also misses a key point in this debate. The threat of climate change isn't some distant problem. I used to think that way. The threat is here right now. We see it in the devastation in Puerto Rico, in Texas, in Florida. We see it in the burning up of the West Coast and the flooding of the East Coast. We see it in melting ice caps and rising sea levels and the destruction of tribal lands. We see it in the bills that we pay, the water that we drink, the food that we eat, and the air that we breathe. You know, the motto of my home state of South Carolina is, while I breathe, I hope. But we know that if we do nothing, if we fail to act, those breaths will get harder to take. That hope will be harder to keep alive. That's why I breathe one heavy sigh of relief after we elected Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. You know, I know our problems are far from being solved. But finally, we have leadership back in the White House that recognizes that the urgency of climate change and taking bold action is so important. And we have to do that right now to combat climate change. You know, on day one of his presidency, Joe Biden signed an order re-entering the Paris Climate Accord. He and Vice President Harris want to put our nation on a path to carbon pollution-free power sector by 2035 and a net zero economy by 2050. And his administration has laid out a comprehensive plan to create good paying union jobs by leading the green energy revolution. President Biden and Vice President Harris are committed to empowering American workers and businesses as we build a truly 21st century American infrastructure, one that is safe and sustainable and that revitalizes our economy. But perhaps nowhere is their commitment stronger or more consequential than that commitment to tribal communities. Climate change is an urgent threat to our public health and our public lands. And tribes have borne the brunt of its wrath for generations. With 40% of federally recognized tribes living in Alaska, climate change has forced some indigenous communities to relocate and threaten their food supply. That's why President Biden and Vice President Harris believe that tribes must be involved in every decision we make about combating climate change. Because for so many of our Native communities, this isn't some abstract issue or far-off prediction. This is here and now. In moments like these, my friends, we need American leadership. Just as we led the space race, we must lead the world in the fight against climate change. The DNC and the DNC Climate Council will play a critical role in this fight, my friends. And I'm so proud of what you have already accomplished. The DNC Climate Council held its very first ever meeting at a Democratic convention last year and was among our most popular council with over 5,200 RSVPs. From Colorado to Iowa to my home state of South Carolina, you held virtual listening sessions to talk about climate and help shape the boldest climate platform in Democratic Party history. And we must continue this work together. We must continue to listen to the communities that have too often been left out. We must organize in every corner of the country, especially with young people. We must step up and lead on climate and environmental justice issues, not just in our cities, but also in our rural communities as well. Not just on the coast, but throughout the country. Not just for our children and their children, but for our friends and our neighbors, our classmates and our co-workers, for all of us. Because together, there is nothing we can't achieve. So thank you all so much for the discussion tonight. Looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Jaime. Thanks for the kind words about the council and for all that you're doing. I am so grateful that President Biden ran on a climate agenda, and starting on day one, he's been making history, fulfilling the mandate that voters gave him to be that climate president. I wanted to say that we know electing Democrats up and down the ballot is absolutely crucial to passing bold environmental justice legislation. The Senate and House races in 2022 are obviously crucial. And I've been really impressed by the way you hit the ground running as a new DNC chair, committing to a 57 state and territory strategy for the midterms, as well as the presidential cycle, by your accessibility and your evident true caring about and passion for all of this. What do you see as the DNC's best way forward to 2022 and 2024?
Well, thank you for that. And thank you all for the support that you give to the DNC. You know, I think the heart of what we have to do and accomplish. I don't know how many of you read Stacey Abrams' op-ed in the New York Times. And in that op-ed, she talked about how you transform a red state to a blue state. And at the heart of that discussion was that one critical component is having a strong state party apparatus in operation. And that's what I'm very much committed to. We are only as strong as our weakest link. And if we have state parties who can barely keep their lights on, who don't have enough staff to reach out to all of their folks, if they can't be supportive of the great candidates that they have running for office, then we can't win the races that we need, and we won't have the people in office that we need to be the leaders to change where we go as a nation. And so that lowest common denominator, that foundation of our party and our effort is our state party apparatus. And that's why I am so committed. We're working on a SWOT analysis of every state party to identify their strengths and their weaknesses and how we can help fill the holes and help them build more capacity so that they can do the work that you all expect them to do. In addition to that, we're going to organize, and we are not waiting until just 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 3 months before the election. We're going to start organizing right now. We're building out right now what that organization is going to look like. And one of the core components of organizing for us will be a national voter registration initiative, going all across the country, getting more people registered to vote so that their voices can be heard and that they can elect people who understand that supporting efforts to end climate change is a must. And so we're going to do that. And I'm glad to have all of you in that partnership to build back better and to build a stronger Democratic Party.
Thank you so much, Jaime. Looking forward to talking more with you in our panel discussion a little later. And now a heartfelt welcome to Randi Weingarten. Randi is the president of the 1.7 million member American Federation of Teachers, AFL-CIO, which represents teachers, paraprofessionals, school-related personnel, higher education faculty, and staff, nurses, and other healthcare professionals, local and state and federal government employees, and early childhood educators. Prior to her election as AFT president in 2008, Randi served for 12 years as president of the United Federation of Teachers, AFT Local 2, representing approximately 200,000 educators in the New York City public school system, as well as home child care providers and other workers in law and education. Randi is a former teacher and a current proud union member. I am deeply grateful for your work and your presence here today. and would love to hear your thoughts on the role of AFT and labor in addressing and raising awareness of the climate crisis and environmental injustice. And I think you might have something to say about climate literacy as well. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Michelle, and I'm honored to be here with you and with Ramón and with Jaime and with Jane and with everyone else that's here tonight. And I'm a little, tongue-tied, because every time I'm on stage with Jane Fonda, I'm a little tongue-tied. I forget that I've been, watching her amazing platform for, I'm not going to say more years than I remember, but it is just seeing the kind of breathtaking clarity with which Jane takes on climate is inspiring to all of us. And the walking in her shoes and the walking in all of our shoes, the note that she said today about how activism, individual activism, is an on-ramp. You go right to what Jaime said, which is individual activism is an on-ramp to politics, to policy, to labor organizing, because what we have all learned is that together we can accomplish what is impossible to do alone. And on some levels, what we see right now in this opportunity at this moment is something really different than maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, as Jane just said. There is an imagination now that we can do something differently. With what Joe Biden just signed today with the American Rescue, something that is bolder than we have seen for generations, done in 50 days, very reminiscent of what FDR did. And if you look at that, and sorry, I am a social studies teacher. I'm not a scientist. I don't even play a scientist on TV, but I listen to these great scientists. But if, as a social studies teacher, what you teach our kids is that the 2 years after FDR was first elected were the years of great, tremendous progressivism that changed our country, where people saw government for its good, not for its bad. And ultimately, the kind of work that all of you are doing to paint the picture of what we need to do for our climate and the goals that we need to get to are really important. And what we as educators do is that we try to connect the dots. So for example, how do we make this real to our kids and to our members and to our communities? You make the issue about carbon footprint, about fossil fuel usage, real when you talk to the asthmatic child in the Bronx who is breathing in the emission air from the Cross Bronx Expressway. And what it means if we had less of a carbon footprint and we had less of that fossil fuel usage, and we could get to what Jane talked about in 2050, where we would have cleaner air, something that is so clear about breathing right now, which we all see because of the COVID crisis. And we all felt when George Floyd said, "I can't breathe." This kind of notion of clean air and being able to breathe, connecting the dots, that's what teachers do. But the second thing we do as unionists is that we don't let the Republicans take an issue and try to use it to pit one group of people against another, which is what they try to do. That is their hallmark. You saw it even in this American Rescue Plan. How dare Roger Wicker say it's so important to help small businesses and then not vote for the bill? How dare they actually say that this bill is full of pork? What this bill is full of is a way to actually ensure that people who are poor, the kids who are poor, will get lifted out of poverty. And so what we need to do in some ways is take on another of the big lie, which is this is about a just transition. This is about good union jobs. You heard Jaime and Jane talk about how we need to be all in this together and lift up unions and lift up good jobs. What was lost by Keystone? Less than 500 jobs. What do we need to have? We need to have thousands and thousands of new jobs that could come from a just transition that we're seeing right now the building trades do with some of the new technologies for energy. And we need to make them good union jobs that pay a decent middle-class wage so someone can actually not only feed their family, but take a vacation every once in a while. And that's the work we're doing as trade unionists. The last thing I'll say is the work we're doing as not just climate activists, but as people who are devoted to ensuring that people understand how to think about this and how to learn about this. Every time there is a devastating incident in climate, like what just happened with the electric grid in Texas because of a winter storm where they knew that if the weather went below 32 degrees, there was a chance for that grid to go down. What happened in California where you saw huge fires destroy communities? What happened in Puerto Rico with hurricanes that destroyed communities? What we do is we need to teach people that there is hope to change that. That if we can actually get the temperature in the way in which Jane spoke about, there's hope to change that, that these kind of events are not cataclysmic. And that we together create that literacy. That we together create those classes in career tech ed that create the pipeline to new energy jobs. That we together create or talk about the urgency so you can discern fact from propaganda. So kids can see that the uncertainty can become great imagination. That's what we all do together. Not let the other side pit fear against hope. That we see with our imagination and our courage and our boldness a new tomorrow. And I end by saying that even every day we are doing things about this. Like just this week, the Rutgers faculty voted to divest from fossil fuel, voted to divest their pensions, led by Naomi Klein. And that was on the heels of the New York City teachers' retirement system doing the same thing. Together, we can accomplish what we can't do individually. And I'm honored as a teacher and a trade unionist and a climate activist to be with all of you.
Thank you so much, Randi. I just wanted to mention we had many teachers who their question was, how can we get up-to-date climate information into the hands of teachers so they can deliver it as part of classroom curriculum? And AFT kindly sent us a link to some wonderful materials. We're sharing that in comments. And if you sign up with us, if you text climate to 1-833-66-11550, you'll get the follow-up email, which will also have that link.
Yep, we started something called Share My Lesson, a platform for teachers and parents and others. And we put material on every single day in various different areas. And what we're also pushing is that we make, as we reimagine education, that we really focus on science and civics in the next couple of years.
It's a wonderful resource. Thanks for sharing it with us so we can share it with everyone here. And we are honored and so glad that Ramón Cruz is here with us. Ramón has over 20 years of experience intersecting the fields of sustainability, environmental policy, urban planning, energy, and climate change. He's worked in the public sector as the Deputy Director of State Environmental Regulatory Agency in Puerto Rico, and held senior positions at the Environmental Defense Fund, the Partnership for New York City, and the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy. In 2020, he was elected president of the Sierra Club, which is the nation's oldest and largest environmental organization with nearly 4 million members and supporters in 64 chapters across the US. Ramón, I am a big fan of Sierra Club and the incredible work that Sierra Club does here in my home state of Michigan on air and water quality and so many environmental justice issues. And I'm hoping you can talk about the intersectionality of environmental justice and climate crisis issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks a lot, Michelle. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for the invitation. You know, it's a pleasure and an honor to be joining you this evening with such a great group of panelists that I admire so much. So with that, I want to greet everyone. I hope you're all safe and healthy wherever you are in the nation and the world, you know, wherever you are right now. I'm actually in the original territory of the Canarsie people, otherwise known as Brooklyn, New York, though I'm originally from Boriquén, the Taíno name for the island of Puerto Rico. And, you know, it has been a difficult year, but thanks to the American people supporting a very ambitious climate agenda that President Biden, Vice President Harris, and the DNC put forward, we're on our way to recover and to reverse the trends in COVID-19 infections and to gear up in order to attack the climate crisis. So as the president of the Sierra Club, you know, which is, as you said, the nation's largest grassroots environmental organization, and like so many of you here tonight, you know, we're working to protect every person's right to breathe clean air, drink clean water, and enjoy and explore our wild and special places. And that work starts with building power, not only in the White House and the halls of Congress, but in communities across the country. You know, federal action, of course, is critical in tackling climate change, but that alone will not solve the crisis. And that's exactly what the Sierra Club and our more than 3.8 million members and supporters are working to do. You know, after 4 years of the worst administration ever for our clean air and water and climate, and a whole lot more, but, you know, of course, we can discuss that later. You know, our work is more urgent and critical than ever. And solving the climate crisis isn't merely about protecting our clean air and water. It must be about ensuring every community is protected. And we no longer treat certain ones, you know, particularly Black and Brown communities, as sacrifice zones. You know, I'm amazed now that the Sierra Club is deepening its commitment to re-examining our history, especially after this summer of reckoning. You know, our history, which is a great one with many successes, but one that has not always been a model to follow also, you know, especially when it comes to our relationship with Native nations or communities of colors or leaders at the forefront of the environmental justice movement. And I'm amazed how people like sometimes criticize this and would urge me to stay in my lane, you know, meaning don't get involved in social issues like racism, police brutality, civil rights, etc. You know, and I'm convinced, like my colleague Hub Hopkins says, you know, we're not going to win the fight against climate change or environmental pollution unless we dismantle systemic racism. And, you know, the rationale, you know, goes like this. You know, in our economic system, we allow pollution in some areas, and we say, you know, for the betterment of society or the economy. And we allow fracking on watersheds and people to live by high concentration of contaminants. You know, even though, of course, the ones that are privileged enough would never buy a house by a power plant or a coal mine, but still we allow these areas to become sacrifice zones. And you know what? You know, in these sacrifice zones live people that become disposable. And we cannot think of anyone disposable unless there is a supportive ideology of supremacy and racism. You know, in the United States, that means white supremacy. And therefore, us as environmentalists must ensure that we dismantle racism and white supremacy in order to confront the climate crisis. You know, it is the persistent racial and economic inequalities and the forces that causes them, you know, embedded throughout our society that have concentrated toxic polluters near and within communities of color, tribal communities, and low-income communities. And the COVID-19 crisis has clearly shown how systemic racism causes inequitable health outcomes, with people of color falling sick and dying at rates far surpassing white people. So not only are people of color burdened by disproportionate rates of air and water pollution, we're also most likely to be impacted by powerful storms and floods, intense heat waves, deadly wildfires, devastating droughts, and other effects of the climate crisis. All these wild communities of colors in places like my native Puerto Rico, you know, also have the least resources to prepare for and recover from the effects of the climate crisis. So it is only when we begin to value the lives of all people equally that the burdens of our polluting extractive economy will be shared and also addressed more forcefully. So thankfully, President Biden wasted no time when he took swift climate action that leaves no community behind within hours of assuming office. And that effort has only continued in the weeks since, you know, putting his plan, the boldest ever we have ever seen, you know, into action by a team of great people, putting equity and justice at the center and inside the White House. So there is so much to look forward to, you know. His global climate summit next month will be critical in both bringing the U.S. once again as a world leader on climate action and driving the action necessary to address the crisis at home. So the summit serves as the perfect launching pad to further the necessary work towards a 50% greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2030 and achieve net zero emissions by 2015 in a cost-effective manner, while delivering substantial equity, public health, and economic benefits, aligning with the administration's Build Back Better priorities and post-pandemic economic goals. So yeah, it's a winning agenda, and we look forward to collaborating with all of you in all of it. You know, HR1, Thrive Agenda, relief package signed today, amazing in only 50 days. So I'll end up here, but look forward to more discussions. So thanks for giving me the chance to join you today.
Thank you so much for being with us. This hour, this time together is why we created the council a year ago. We are building out environmental caucuses in all 57 states and territories, building the connecting tissue between them on this win-win-win issue for Democrats. We have a real movement. Climate, environmental justice policy are good for people, they're good for the planet, and they are good for winning. And we have a climate champion in the White House, but President Biden can't do it alone. And so we really enjoy and look forward to working more with Chair Harrison to build out strong grassroots organizing across the US. So please join us by texting climate to 833-66-11550. And now we will turn to the panel, responding in the remaining time to some of the great questions suggested by listeners. We got over 150 of them. My colleague on the DNC Council, Dr. Allison Stevens, will moderate. Allison is the Council's Director of Black Engagement, who has degrees from the University of Nevada, certificate in climate change from Yale, and recently completed her PhD at Rutgers. Allison, thanks so much for guiding this conversation.
Thank you. I'm very excited about it. As you said, we had a lot of interest, and so this is the moment where some members of our audience will get to hear questions that they have asked. One of the things that you'll hear is that a lot of times questions were coming up over and over again. So there were several people asking the same questions, and so we combined them. One question that came up over and over again from our listeners, from Christina in Virginia, Bonnie in Colorado, Karen in Hawaii, and many more, is how do we maintain hope? And relatedly, is it too late? Ramón, I'd ask you to jump into that conversation first.
Well, thanks a lot. And, no, it's not too late. The climate crisis is already here, but we can and must take action to protect our communities and ensure a livable future. And I believe, there are many things that can give us hope. But for me, it's being with all of you here tonight on Sierra Club webinars, and hopefully once again soon, at events in person, talking about how to use our power and keep building more to address this crisis, So get involved in your local organizations and support this national agenda. We just experienced the importance of people becoming active, voting, and maintaining themselves, ourselves informed. So we can do this together. So in the interest of time, I'll stop there, but there's so much that we can do. Thanks.
Was there anyone else who wanted to jump in quickly? Okay, we'll move to
Dr. Stevens, I would just add this. When I was on the campaign trail, I often talked about our motto in South Carolina, while I breathe, I hope. But you know what we did, my friends? We brought hope to this nation by voting. So in essence, while I breathe, I vote. And that is how we bring hope back to this nation. Because when we all voted, we were able to change the leadership. And Joe Biden, just in these few weeks, has already changed the direction of where we're going on this issue of climate change. There's still a lot of work to be done, but we know that we had an administration and leadership that wasn't willing to do it. But we now have an administration and new leadership that is. And that was all because every single one of us went off and we voted.
Thank you, Jaime, and thank you, Ramón, for responding to that. We're going to move to Esther in Metro Detroit, Daniela in Converse, Texas, Lucero in Columbia, South Carolina, and dozens more who asked, what can I do right now to get involved? Jane, can you respond to that?
Don't try to do it as an individual. Join a group. Obviously, what I'd like you to do is go to the website firedrillfridays.com and join us. We are building community. We are building a movement. And also my book, What Can I Do? My Path from Climate Despair to Action. It gives very, very clear actions that you can take. A lot of people in the chat room have said we should thank fossil fuel workers. So just real quickly, I want to say that I agree. These are people who have done the dirtiest, most dangerous jobs in building our country. And that is why we should not blame them. We should thank them and make sure that they are not left behind with this transition off of fossil fuels. Thank you.
Thank you so much for saying that. I mean, that's where that concept of the just transition comes in, and it is so important, but it is possible. Randi, I'm wondering if you wanted to add anything to that question about what we can do right now to get involved.
So I just agree with Jane. There are many different on-ramps into organizations where you can create community. And community is really important to create because it also creates hope when you're doing things together with other people. You don't feel alone. And after COVID, it's really important not to feel alone and to feel that sense of community. So you already have two groups that are here that, the Sierra Club, you have, you just had both of the, you have the Friday groups, you have Sierra Club, you have our unions, we have on college campuses, we have the Sunrise Movement. There are lots of different ways. And in fact, what we'll do in Share My Lesson is we'll put all those groups together on the platform so that people have access to it for free. But that is really important, to do things together in fellowship.
Yeah, and it sounds like that connects to the previous question. Getting together, working together, there's no shortage of resources and people to connect to, and that is what gives us that hope. So thank you all for participating in this. I know we only got through a couple of questions. Michelle, did you want to continue?
Thank you so much. Jane Fonda, Jaime Harrison, Ramón Cruz, Randi Weingarten, such an honor. I've learned so much, and I know everyone who listened has. Thank you to our chat moderators, Chris Round, Preston Van Alstine, Kira Gilbreth, and to our listeners. We're full of hope for people, for policies, and for planet. With Earth Day approaching, we know we're going to be hearing more from climate and environmental justice leaders. And we'll be taking everything that we have we'll take everything we heard tonight to heart and take it forward into the future. We won on November 3rd. Now we're tackling the crisis, and we're going to go win again in 2022 and 2024, and we're going to win for people and for planet. I know Ramón has to go. He is going to an event, and also President Biden is about to begin making his very first primetime address since taking office about the pandemic. Thank you so much, everyone. Good evening. Until next time.
Thank you for your leadership, Michelle.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.